What's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Eric Wilson, joined by my co-host, Collin Alcabes, and today we're going to be covering some of the players who have really stood out for the Rangers throughout preseason so far. The Rangers are 4 games deep. They're currently at a record of 1-3. It's not the best. They took some big losses, but at the end of the day, that's not really what matters here during preseason. It's really for the young prospects to show their development to the Rangers, while the main regular players can just find their legs before the regular season begins. Sorry we haven't been covering it in depth too much so far. I just had mouth surgery, so I had to take a step back. But we're back, feeling better, and we're here to cover the rest of preseason as we move very close to opening night. But before we really get into things, Collin, how are you doing today?
I'm good. It's been a blast watching the kids kind of take a run at the league. I'm excited to see what's coming up, and to see who actually makes the team when it's all said and done.
Of course. And, we're going to be saying our 3 standout players so far, but I do want to give a quick honorable mention to 2 players who just came short of this list, Will Cooley and Blake Wheeler. Cooley's a young prospect. He has 1 goal and 1 assist in 3 games so far. He's looked really solid, and he's one of those young guys who does have a pretty strong chance of maybe making the NHL roster at some point this year. And Blake Wheeler, just recently signed this offseason to a 1-year deal. He has 1 goal in 2 games played so far. He's looked really well, and it seems that he's fitting in so far with the team. So just before we get into the top 3, Collin, just what are your thoughts on Cooley and Wheeler really quick?
I think they both had pretty good preseason so far. I think Wheeler is fitting in nicely and being that big body net presence that we need, similar to what Kreider does for that first line. He hopes to do in either that second or third line role, and I think he does a good job of that. And I think Cooley has been very promising. I think that the goal and the assist, he's in the dirty areas fighting for those pucks. He scored that with the goalie pulled. He scored in the last minute. I believe it was against the Islanders, but it was a nice goal. And we need guys to be like that in front instead of finesse players. We got plenty of those guys who will dipsy doodle around everybody, Panarin and Zibanejad. But we need those guys who aren't afraid to get into the nitty-gritty areas. Guys like Kreider when he scored 50 goals that 1 year, and guys like Wheeler. So I think he is another promising prospect that can do just that.
I think you said that very perfectly, Collin. I have to agree with everything that you said right there. But let's get into the top 3 standout players so far. The first one I want to bring up, Kaapo Kakko. And he's only appeared in 2 preseason games so far. He has 1 goal. It was 15 seconds into the matchup against the Islanders, and it was a pretty sweet goal too. So he has 1 point in 2 games. It's nothing too incredible. He's not going point per game here, but he's looked really well overall. Kakko is one of those players who's hopefully going to break out. He's going to be receiving top 6 minutes for pretty much the first time in his career on a consistent basis. So there should be a big season coming out of Kakko. Collin, what are your thoughts on him so far, and what do you expect from him from the rest of preseason and the regular season?
I think I was ready to put him on this list after that Islanders game. I mean, scoring 15 seconds in was nice. It was awesome to watch him do that. It's definitely good for the confidence, but on top of that, he also just looked dominant with the puck. And I get he's not playing with all NHL guys yet, but the Islanders didn't just play a bunch of scrubs. They had some NHL level talent on that team, and he was just manhandling everybody, it seemed. After a couple of years, he's finally figuring out how to use his size, his frame, and his speed, and he's putting it all together. And, he could become dangerous when you put him with Kreider and Zibanejad. We've seen the underlying metrics in the past. It's one of the better lines on the Rangers, and I think that he has a very promising future ahead of him, hopefully. He's my breakout candidate for the year. I think he could easily hit 25 goals, maybe even 30, but I don't want to get too crazy. But I think he's looking very promising.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're going to see some pretty significant career high increases from Kakko. It's still unconfirmed who he's going to be playing with, but chances are it's going to be either Kreider and Zibanejad or Panarin and Trocheck. So just the level of star power around him alone, combined with his natural skill that he's been developing, we should see a big season out of Kakko. I think that, as everyone knows here on this channel, Panarin is my favorite player, but Kakko is a very close second now. Every time he touches the puck, I just fall in love with his abilities more and more. He's looked strong. He has great puck control skills. He just skates around people, and it takes 3 or 4 defenders to take the puck away from him. He's just that big size of his is really coming into play. He just hasn't had the points yet to really just solidify himself as a great NHL player, but I think that might happen this upcoming season. But the second player that I want to acknowledge really quick as a standout player, Erik Gustafson. Newly signed defender. He's one of those guys who, it wasn't really sure who was going to be filling in that third defensive pairing alongside Braden Schneider. Zach Jones was always a candidate. Matt Robertson was like a dark horse. And then there was Eric Gustafson, the veteran defenseman presence right there. And so far, he has 1 goal, 2 assists in 3 games. So in 2 games, sorry, that's 3 points in 2 games. So he's been going over a point per game so far. And he's looked really great offensively. Looks like he's another player similarly to Blake Wheeler, who's kind of just assimilated with the Rangers extremely quickly. And at this point, I think he is the favorite to receive that NHL role. I think Zach Jones has kind of taken a step back. But Collin, what are your thoughts on Gustafson so far?
I like his play in the ozone. I'll say that his snipe against the Devils. It was a beauty, and he was slamming his stick. He wanted that thing. He's a very offensive-minded defenseman, and I'm worried that maybe we don't need that, especially for our third pairing line. Schneider is definitely a good stay-at-home guy, but I don't know that I want to put somebody who's so offense first with Schneider. I feel like that could hurt his development. I feel like he still has a lot left to unlock with his game. That being said, Laviolette, I think we talked about it in the last episode, loves Gustafson. Constantly talks him up. Was a big fan of him when he was over with the Capitals. It was a big reason why he was brought over. I think if he can buckle down in the defensive zone, he easily has the role. I think he'll definitely start with it. But I think if we start to see some defensive issues, he could slip out and we could see a guy like Zach Jones try to make the most of that opportunity.
Yeah, I have to agree there. The Rangers do have a lot of offensive-minded defensemen on the team. Fox is a point-scoring machine, but at the same time, he has a guy like Ryan Lindgren who's so defensive-oriented that they kind of offset each other, and it works really well as the Rangers' top pairing. And we've seen problems in the past where Keandre Miller, another very offensive-minded defenseman, when he kind of lacks very elite defensive abilities as well, which is where Jacob Trouba needs to step in there. So I do have to agree with you. Putting Gustafson alongside Schneider could be a little bit of a risk right there. But I think overall, just looking at everyone within the Rangers system, I don't know if Zach Jones is NHL ready yet. I know he's thrived and succeeded in the AHL, but translating it over to the NHL, it's become a little weird. I don't know. Do you think Jones would be ready in place of Gustafson possibly?
I like Jones. I think he's undersized when it comes to the NHL, but everybody said Adam Fox is undersized, and look at him. He's got a Norris under his belt already, and he's constantly lighting up the league. I'm not saying Zach Jones is going to be the next Adam Fox, but I think he can definitely break the stigma of being undersized. He's got good footwork and good skating. It's just tough when it comes to net front battles, especially with the guys like Anders Lee or any big-bodied forward on any team. Is going to give him a harder time than most. So obviously, if he can iron out those problems, I think he has a good chance at sticking around if Gustafson falters.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And before we head on to the third player, who we think has been the best standout player thus far during preseason, let's just flip the switch really quick and talk about the opposite side of the spectrum here. Players who have stood out in a negative way, really just not shine bright at all for the Rangers so far. I think the 2 names right there for me got to be Jonathan Quick and Alexis Lafreniere so far. Jonathan Quick is just, I don't know what's happened. He's only appeared in 2 games so far, and both times he looked like Swiss cheese in the net. And Lafreniere at the same time, throughout 3 games played, only has 1 assist, hasn't really gotten on the score sheet yet. So just really quickly, Collin, what are your thoughts on their performances so far?
I haven't been entirely impressed with either of them. I'm not ready to throw in the towel on him. I think if we remember last season, Halak didn't get off to the best start, and I feel like he turned the season around and actually was a very serviceable backup. And I think Quick can do just that. I also think we have to remember that we're playing with some inexperienced defensemen in front of him. So sometimes he's left out to dry a little bit, but I feel like he needs to definitely fix up some things before the season. So I can see him getting a couple more preseason starts just to make sure he's ready, because Igor is already a midseason form, it would appear. And Lafreniere is, I don't even have an answer for it. He just looks invisible out there. Obviously, an assist is nice, but from a former first overall pick playing against guys in the AHL, he should be lighting it up a little bit more, or at least trying some of those crazier things like we're seeing guys like Logan Cooley and Bedard and guys like that. They're being a little bit more experimentative and trying and putting themselves out there, and it's paying off for them. It's paying dividends, because I'm noticing those guys. I'm talking about those guys now. I didn't really notice Lafreniere's play, And as a forward, that's not really what you want to hear. You want to be able to recall some good moments, and I haven't really seen a whole lot of those yet. But I'm hoping that he can turn it around by the time the season gets started and be a solid force for this team.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree. It's like I mentioned earlier, just for the NHL regulars in preseason, their main objective is really to just like get warmed up for the regular season. Lafreniere is not out there to be a showstopper. He's still finding his game. It's been a long off season, but I don't want to get too deep into that. That's definitely a discussion that we could dedicate an entire episode to. So be sure to check that out in the next couple of days whenever we record it. But more on that later. The last player that we want to bring up to your attention as a preseason standout so far, in my opinion, has looked the best out of any Ranger thus far. You guys can guess it, Brendan Othman, right? 2 goals in 3 games so far. He's looked really solid, and I really like what I'm seeing. But Collin, I'll just ask you, what are your opinions on Othman so far?
I think he is as advertised. His shot is lethal. His skating is quick. He's strong with the puck as well. He hasn't really been a liability in either end of the ice, and I think every time he's out there, there's a good chance that we're going to score. Unfortunately, the bounces haven't entirely gone his way. We've played against some really good goalies. I know the Devils goalie, who continues to give us nightmares, was giving him a hard time, but I think that he has a very, very promising NHL future ahead.
Yeah, and I know before we started recording, we had like a quick little chat where you said you think Will Cooley still has the highest chance out of any prospect to make the Rangers. I would beg to differ and say that now belongs to Othman. I know that the Rangers have been experimenting with him on the right wing so far throughout training camp and preseason, but he is a natural left winger. And I think if the Rangers were to give Othman a shot in the NHL, it would need to be a top 9 role. You're not going to waste Othman's potential on the 4th line. So I could easily see a world where the first line consists of Kreider, Zibanejad, Kakko, then Panarin, Trocheck, Lafreniere. 3rd line would be Othman, Hedel, and Wheeler. And then the 4th line would then consist of VC, Bonino, and Goudreau. So I think that is in the realm of possibility. But just like before we wrap things up, just like, do you think that could be possible, or do you think it's best to let Othman develop just for one more year in the AHL?
Well, if I remember correctly, did he play in the AHL last year?
No, this is his first season going pro.
Yeah, I'd like to give him a year in the AHL. I remember you were mentioning a clause in a previous episode that he, for some reason, couldn't play. I'd like to give him a year in the AHL, get acclimated to the Ranger style of play, and then down the line, maybe when Wheeler leaves, give him a top 9, even top 6 role. I don't want to rush him. I wish that we had taken time with Kaapo and Alexis Lafreniere, and we didn't, and they both kind of faltered. I think that the way to do it is to give them a little bit more time in the AHL. And so I'd like to see him do that, especially in a bottom 6 role. We're looking for more forecheckers. I mean, Gallant said it last year, he needed forecheckers, and Laviolette's teams have always incorporated some forecheckers. And while I love a balance of skill and forechecking on that bottom 6, I think they brought in guys like Bonino and Pitlick and players like that to use them on those 3rd and 4th lines. And I think a guy like Othman wouldn't really fit in the type of role that they're looking for in those bottom 6 roles. I think he's more suited to a top 6, and I think that he would slot in nicely on that 2nd line in the future.
Yeah, I mean, you make some valid points, and like, there's 2 games remaining in preseason. The regular season starts in just 10 days on October 12th. So I guess we'll just kind of have to wait and see what Laviolette decides that he wants to do, what he wants this new Rangers team to look like. But until then, we'll be keeping you guys updated on everything Rangers, any breaking news or roster cuts or anything that happens. But make sure you leave your thoughts on the topic down in the comments below. What are your thoughts on all of the names that we've discussed in today's episode, and any other names that you think might be a pretty good standout? Be sure to tune in to the next one. Leave a like, make sure you subscribe, ring that bell so you don't miss a notification, and we'll see you next time. Have a good one, and
let's go Rangers.